Burmese pythons have devastated native wildlife in the Everglades.
Solution: Florida is deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons. They attract the pythons, allowing wildlife officers to swoop in and catch them.
Deep in the heart of the American wilderness, a war is raging. Florida's vast, unique ecosystem is being consumed by one of the world's most devastating invasive species, the Burmese python. After decades of losing this battle, the fight has taken an astonishing turn, swapping hunters and hounds for a tiny, furry, solar-powered soldier, the Robo Rabbit, the apex predator and the limits of manpower. In the swampy stretch of South Florida, where sawgrass blends with cypress trees, the air hangs heavy and the silence is deceptive. This land hosts a top predator and a collapsing ecosystem. This place is called the Everglades, one of the most unique and vital ecosystems in the United States. For decades, this land supported alligators, panthers, and a rich array of birds, but in the past 40 years, an unseen invader has taken root, transforming this ecological treasure into a biological disaster zone. That invader is the Burmese python, and the story of how it got here is a mix of human ambition and sheer negligence. The foundation of this crisis was laid long before any storm hit. Starting in the 1970s and 80s, these spectacular snakes were imported from Southeast Asia and became hugely popular pets in the Miami area. People bought tiny hatchlings, charmed by an exotic creature. The problem? They rapidly grow into massive 20-foot predators. When owners realized they had a terrifying, expensive animal that needed huge enclosures, many simply did the unthinkable. They opened the cage door. A Burmese python was first recorded in the Everglades in 1979. These snakes were already in the wild, quietly starting a small feral population. Then came Hurricane Andrew in August 1992.
Andrew here, a hurricane which continues to strengthen. Pressure now down to 974 millibars.
The Category 5 storm was a catastrophe that created a mass release of captive animals across South Florida. A reptile breeding facility was utterly destroyed, and hundreds of pythons were suddenly washed out into the swamps and wetlands. This single massive event injected a huge new supply of snakes into an ecosystem where a few were already struggling to survive. It was the perfect storm. Irresponsible pet owners had prepared the ground, and the hurricane delivered the massive population boost needed to establish a true breeding colony. The Everglades, unfortunately, was python paradise. With a warm climate, zero natural predators, and a virtually unlimited supply of prey, the snakes didn't just survive, they exploded. Their biology is perfectly suited for invasion. A single, large female can lay up to 100 eggs every year. Once established, the invasion is exponentially driven by this reproductive power. Furthermore, the python's predatory abilities are truly superior. They hunt using highly refined instincts, detecting subtle changes in temperature with their pit organs, and tracking prey using a sophisticated sense of smell via their tongues. These highly efficient biological tools, combined with their superior size, give them an undeniable edge over Florida's native predators. Biologists estimate there are now tens of thousands of these pythons roaming the wetlands, and they are literally eating the Everglades alive. The effect of this invasion on native wildlife hasn't been a gradual decline, but a total collapse. Studies show that populations of small mammals, like raccoons, opossums, and especially marsh rabbits, a python favorite, have dropped by more than 90% in the heavily affected areas. These pythons are the vacuum cleaners of the swamp, essentially deleting entire parts of the food web. They are big enough to prey on bobcats, foxes, and even adult deer. There are documented cases of pythons challenging and defeating alligators. The entire complex food chain of the Everglades has buckled under their advance. The crisis is an all-out emergency. Despite this, removing them has proven nearly impossible. The Everglades is a massive, confusing maze spanning 1.5 million acres. The pythons are masters of camouflage, blending into the mud and dense vegetation, and they primarily hunt at night. Even the most seasoned hunter can spend days searching without a single sighting. The biggest challenge isn't killing them, it's simply finding them. This key reality has plagued every official who has tried to solve the crisis. The severity of this ecological crisis forced officials into desperate attempts. These early efforts became a chronicle of expensive, frustrating failures, pushing wildlife managers to try everything they knew before finally having to try something nobody saw coming. With the Everglades under siege, Florida officials couldn't just stand by. They knew they had to fight back, and their first idea was to mobilize an army of human hunters. The state launched programs featuring professional contractors and even huge public hunting competitions, the Python Challenges.
Prey in the Florida Everglades as hundreds of hunters descend on the Sunshine State, kill as many Burmese pythons,
Offering cash prizes for the longest and most snakes captured. You'd see images that looked straight out of a reality show, airboats cutting through the night, hunters with machetes and flashlights. The events certainly raised awareness, but behind the hype, the results were sobering. For a population estimated in the tens of thousands, the biggest challenge events barely removed a handful of snakes, often yielding fewer than 200 animals from thousands of participants. The bounty system was an expensive, dramatic failure, and it quickly became clear why. The problem wasn't a lack of effort. It was the snake's perfect defense. The pythons are ambush predators, with natural camouflage so effective that they are nearly impossible to spot. One study found that even experienced scientists had a detection rate of less than 1% when they knew pythons were nearby. They live in a vast, swampy maze that humans can barely navigate, while the snakes swim and slither effortlessly. Professional removal efforts struggled with this invisibility, and the few successful captures often led to dangerous situations. These snakes are large, powerful, and built to constrict. Handling a live python requires intense focus and highly specific training to ensure a humane killing process. All of these efforts, the long, fruitless searches, the dangerous captures, and the high operating costs, were simply no match for a snake that could lay up to 100 eggs every year. The snakes were reproducing much faster than humans could find or remove them. Faced with the limitations of boots on the ground, researchers had to get creative. They understood that if the hunters couldn't find the pythons, they needed the pythons to find each other. This led to the creation of the scout snake method, originally nicknamed the Judas snake technique after the biblical betrayer, though many now use the less controversial term. This method completely flipped the script. Researchers capture a male python, surgically implant a radio transmitter, and release him back into the swamp. During the winter breeding season, this scout snake does what comes naturally. He goes looking for a mate. When the tracker stops moving, the researchers know they've hit the jackpot. Pythons are usually solitary, so a stationary scout means he has likely found a breeding ball of other pythons, including a large, untagged female. This technique is highly effective because it targets the reproductive engine of the invasion. Removing one large female, who might be carrying 100 or more eggs, has the greatest impact on suppressing population growth. In one remarkable instance, a single scout snake led researchers to a female weighing 215 pounds and carrying a record of 122 eggs. But even this breakthrough wasn't the silver bullet they needed. It's expensive, labor-intensive, and primarily effective only during the short winter breeding season. To truly win this fight, they needed a tactic that could work year-round, on a massive scale, and most importantly, be more efficient than a snake looking for love. The initial efforts tell a story of costly failure, forcing wildlife managers to attempt everything familiar before finally resorting to something completely unexpected. The ethical dilemma and engineering the perfect lure. The professional hunters and the scout snake teams were giving everything they had, But the math was always against them. The pythons were simply multiplying too fast.
And curiosity as the python.
To truly impact the invasion, scientists realized they needed to stop searching blindly and start concentrating the snakes in areas where they could be easily captured. The answer, they theorized, wasn't about more manpower, it was about understanding the snake's appetite. Scientists noted that among the many native creatures decimated by the pythons, the marsh rabbit had suffered one of the steepest declines. It was clear that these small mammals were a preferred meal. This led to a difficult but straightforward hypothesis. If pythons were already targeting marsh rabbits in the wild,
Rabbits. Florida scientists hope that these fluffy decoys can help with a very real problem.
then introducing them as live bait might be the key to luring the elusive predators out of their hiding spots. They began experiments by setting up enclosed pens near water, placing live rabbits inside while biologists monitored the sites. The tests proved what researchers suspected. The presence of live rabbits successfully drew pythons into predictable locations, making them much easier to detect and remove. For desperate wildlife managers, this was a clear biological breakthrough. The lure strategy was scientifically sound. The results, while effective, were deeply unsettling. Using living animals as a means of capture brought immediate and serious ethical challenges. While the conservation goal was to save the entire ecosystem, the tactic was neither sustainable on a large scale nor morally palatable. Caring for the rabbits in the swamp's harsh heat and humidity required continuous, costly oversight. The animals needed food, water, and shelter, but many simply didn't survive. Conservationists and the public alike questioned the morality of putting one species in harm's way as sacrificial bait to save another. When reports surfaced that many rabbits were killed by pythons before researchers could even intervene, the public backlash grew strong. Animal welfare organizations like PETA voiced loud objections, calling the approach inhumane. Even within the scientific community, there was profound discomfort. While the goal was to save the entire Everglades ecosystem, the tactic was neither sustainable on a large scale nor ethically palatable. The idea of sacrificing a native species just to lure a predator left a bitter taste. Ultimately, these ethical concerns forced a necessary decision. The widespread use of live rabbit bait had to be discontinued. These grim trials were difficult, but they revealed a crucial lesson. The strategy itself worked. The experiments proved that the illusion of rabbits could lure pythons more effectively than any hunter or pheromone trap ever could. The pythons responded powerfully to the presence of their favorite prey. What scientists needed now was a way to keep the successful baiting strategy without the blood, the cost, or the ethical nightmare. The new mandate became clear: find a way to keep the lure without the life. This moral hurdle pushed scientists to the very edge of technology, marking a true turning point in the war for the Everglades. If flesh and blood were too complicated, they would turn to silicon and steel. This challenge immediately inspired a radical idea: the birth of the Robo Rabbit.
Investigate these robotic rabbits in the pens. That would be a success.
The challenge facing Florida's wildlife experts was unprecedented, creating a decoy so convincing it could fool a 20-foot-long predator with hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary instinct. If the pythons were winning the battle of biology, then the counterattack had to be launched with technology. The result, a project years in the making and led by researchers at the University of Florida, was the Robo Rabbit. This wasn't some wind-up toy. The Robo Rabbit was designed to be the ultimate piece of deception. Researchers studied the exact features of the native marsh rabbit, the python's favorite meal. They used durable, waterproof synthetic materials that could survive the Everglades' punishing environment: the scorching heat, the humidity, and the standing water. Mike Kirkland, the lead biologist, noted that they simply retrofitted ordinary toy rabbits, replacing the stuffing with electronic components. However, they knew that to a massive snake, sight wasn't the most important sense. What makes the Robo Rabbit truly remarkable is that it targets the python's superpowers. The engineers didn't stop at looks. they also went for behavior. Each robot contains small electric motors capable of producing subtle movements like an ear twitch, a slight shift of the body, just enough to convince a hunting python that it has stumbled upon a vulnerable, living creature. These mechanical motions, though minimal, are calibrated to mimic the random, nervous twitches that instantly flag a small mammal to a hunting snake. To truly fool an apex predator, the decoy had to appeal to the python's sophisticated sensory system. Pythons don't hunt based on sight alone. They hunt based on heat and smell. Every Robo Rabbit contains an internal heating system. Tiny heaters within the shell create a precise warmth signature, replicating the specific body heat of live prey. This is absolutely critical because pythons use special pit organs on their faces to see heat, allowing them to strike accurately even in total darkness. That heat signature is a biological homing beacon that the snakes simply cannot ignore. To complete the illusion, the units are equipped with scent emitters. These devices release specific chemical compounds that mimic the natural musk and odor of a marsh rabbit. That scent helps lure the snakes from a distance, pulling them out of the dense undergrowth and confirming the decoy is irresistible once the python gets close. The Robo Rabbit was engineered to check every biological box, movement, heat, and smell, making it the most potent lure ever devised. The Robo Rabbit is not just bait, but a networked intelligence system. The primary purpose is not to capture the snake itself, it's to locate and alert the human removal teams. Every unit is equipped with a motion sensor camera system that streams live video back to central monitoring stations. But because watching hundreds of video feeds is impossible for human staff, the system uses artificial intelligence software. This AI is trained specifically to recognize the distinct patterns of a python's scales, its head shape, or its slithering motion. The AI's ability to instantly differentiate a python from other reptiles, like native water snakes, is a massive logistical advantage. When a python is detected, the system immediately pings the field teams by GPS, giving the human experts a chance to move in before the camouflaged snake can slip away. This technology immediately eliminated the hunter's biggest problem, the sheer difficulty of detecting these snakes. Getting these high-tech lures into the remote, infrastructure-free Everglades required smart logistics. The Robo Rabbits rely on built-in solar panels and rechargeable batteries for power. This design allows them to remain active for weeks at a time without constant human maintenance. The initial pilot program, launched by the South Florida Water Management District, involved deploying 120 of these custom-built units, each costing around $4,000, across the worst python hotspots during the summer. They were strategically placed near known travel corridors and historical nesting sites, maximizing the robot's chance of an encounter based on years of collected data. The introduction of these robots marked a monumental shift in the invasion war, bringing a sense of cautious optimism to a fight that had been nothing but failure. The deployment was flawless, the technology was sound, and the alerts started coming in almost immediately. But within weeks, the camera feed began capturing footage that the engineers and scientists had never expected, something unsettling that threw the entire future of the project into doubt. The pythons, the ultimate creatures of pure instinct, appeared to be learning.
Statistically significant number of pythons that are coming to and
The Robo Rabbits were a triumph of engineering, and the initial deployment was a success. Alerts started hitting the monitoring centers almost immediately, proving the decoys were effective at pulling the elusive pythons out of hiding. Biologists were hopeful, feeling for the first time in years that the snakes were coming to us instead of the other way around. But as the days passed, the AI-driven cameras began sending back footage that was instantly misinterpreted. While some pythons struck the decoy with pure instinct, others behaved strangely. The cameras captured giant snakes slowly circling the rabbits for long minutes, sometimes resting right beside them, and in some startling cases, abandoning the attack entirely before retreating into the swamp. This footage was shared widely, and a sensational new theory exploded across the public sphere. The pythons were learning. The idea of a slow, instinct-driven snake suddenly outsmarting high-tech American engineering was thrilling. It became a viral narrative, the myth of the intelligent python, suggesting the snakes were already distinguishing real prey from the machines. This created a genuine moment of alarm, throwing the future of the project into doubt. However, the field scientists were quick to provide a vital reality check. Pythons are driven primarily by instinct,
Concept of humanely removing the pythons is key, says Kirkland.
responding to simple cues: heat, movement, and scent. They do not possess the complex cognitive ability to learn and deliberately avoid specific traps in the way a raccoon or a coyote might. The supposed learning was far more likely a function of simple animal behavior and human factors. For instance, the increased human activity around the decoy sites, the repeated setting up and checking of pens, could be making the snakes wary. Pythons are highly sensitive to vibrations and ground movements, and they would naturally avoid areas with regular human presence. Furthermore, simple changes in weather or natural prey abundance can dramatically alter their hunting behavior, making them hesitant even around live food. The real twist wasn't the snake's intelligence, but the danger of misinterpretation in a technology-driven project. It's far more probable that any perceived failure or hesitation was due to logistical challenges or a slight imperfection in the heat or scent signature of the decoy, which the researchers planned to tweak anyway. The viral narrative about the learning snake was a perfect example of science fiction overriding scientific reality, a powerful piece of viral content that created a false sense of panic. The true breakthrough, however, was the massive volume of data now being collected. The cameras, even when not registering a capture, were generating an unplanned surveillance breakthrough. They were providing constant, real-time data, mapping preferred hunting trails and habitats. Even if the lure needed refinement, the intelligence being gathered was invaluable. The issue was not that the python was too smart, but that the human war against the python was about to face a far more taxing obstacle, but the dedication required to keep fighting a persistent, highly elusive enemy. This ecological arms race takes an immense toll, not just on the environment, but on the individuals dedicating their lives to this endless war. The future of the fight. The war against the python is fought on two fronts: the technical, with the new Robo Rabbits, and the human, deep in the heart of the Everglades. While the cameras capture the python's behavior, they miss the psychological toll the hunt takes on the men and women doing the difficult work. Hunting pythons is less like a sport and more like a never-ending patrol. The job demands constant vigilance during long, slow nights in thick, swampy terrain. The stress isn't just physical, it's mental. Every shadow could be a snake. Every rustle in the grass requires high-level attention, which is mentally draining over hours of darkness. When a snake is finally found, the situation becomes instantly dangerous. Although pythons aren't venomous, confronting a massive, wild constrictor is physically terrifying. They will bite, and their sheer power when they wrap around a limb is immense. Hunters must remain calm and focused while grappling with an animal that could be 2 to 3 times their weight and length. Yet, the most difficult part of the job for many hunters is not the capture. It's the required humane euthanasia. Program guidelines mandate a specific 2-step process to ensure a quick, ethical end. Even the most hardened contractors, who know that removing one invasive python saves countless native species, find it an emotionally difficult act. For hunters who are also reptile enthusiasts, the conflict is even deeper. They must reconcile their passion for these magnificent creatures with the conservation necessity of killing them. They bear the emotional burden of the ecological harm the snakes cause, knowing they are the necessary agents of tragedy. Despite the danger and the emotional conflict, the intensity of the hunt has provided an unexpected therapeutic outlet for a specific group of participants: military veterans. Groups like the Swamp Apes program have found that python removal provides a powerful and productive sense of mission for veterans dealing.
The swamp apes take veterans into the Everglades to track and capture Burmese pythons
with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The hypervigilance that is a symptom of PTSD suddenly becomes an asset in the Everglades, allowing them to excel at spotting the perfectly camouflaged pythons. The long hours of focus and the immediate tangible goal of protecting the environment replace traumatic memories with a new, meaningful purpose and a welcome sense of camaraderie. The demanding physical work and the immersion in the remote wilderness help them focus and heal. The python hunt is a lightning rod for ethical debate, especially from animal welfare organizations concerned about the humane treatment of the snakes. For conservationists and hunters, however, the moral calculus is clear. The painful necessity of killing pythons prevents the greater ecological harm of losing entire native species, like the marsh rabbit. The individuals on the ground, whether they are professional contractors or veterans seeking therapy, are the human embodiment of this difficult ethical line. They are proof that fighting the pythons requires more than technology. It demands immense physical courage and a capacity to manage profound moral conflict every single day. Their dedication firmly establishes that the question isn't just about the technology's success, but about the long-term human will to persevere. With human dedication firmly established, the question remains: can the current technology be scaled and refined enough to secure a lasting victory? The Robo Rabbit project proved two things.
Deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
The lure concept works, and the pythons will challenge any new technology. But after the initial field tests and the viral confusion over snakes, learning, the next step in the war became overwhelmingly clear. They needed to stop thinking about a few decoys and start planning for an army of robots. The battle for the Everglades wasn't going to be won by a few clever gadgets. It needed a sustainable, industrial-level solution. The biggest immediate hurdle is financial. Every single Robo Rabbit, custom-built with heat emitters, solar panels, motors, and AI-enabled cameras, costs around $4,000 to produce. The initial deployment of just over 100 units was a proof-of-concept experiment. To secure a lasting victory across the 1.5 million acres of the Everglades, researchers calculate they would need hundreds, maybe thousands of these devices operating continuously. This demands massive, sustained funding that conservation programs often struggle to secure. The true cost goes beyond the hardware. The robots need a support system. Teams of dedicated staff are required to deploy the decoys, constantly check their operational status, replace batteries, and maintain the complex equipment against the swamp's harsh heat and humidity. Simply put, scaling the technology requires scaling the entire logistical infrastructure, turning a successful pilot project into an expensive, large-scale public works program. But officials argue the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the continuous economic drain from ecological harm and the irreversible loss of a national treasure. To justify this immense cost, the technology must be perfect. The viral narrative about the python's learning may have been fictional, but it highlighted a real vulnerability. The slight chance that a subtle difference between the robot and a real rabbit could trigger wariness in the snakes. Researchers are already working on the next generation of the Robo Rabbit, focusing on total sensory deception. Engineers are improving the weather resistance and battery efficiency, ensuring the decoys run for longer periods. More importantly, scientists are refining the scent and heat signatures. They are tweaking the chemical compounds released by the emitters and improving the precision of the thermal output to ensure the decoy registers as a flawlessly convincing meal to the snake's heat-sensing organs. The goal is to close the sensory gap entirely, making the lure absolutely irresistible every single time. This is a scientific race. Humanity needs to innovate faster than the snake's instinct can adapt. The real long-term power of the robo-rabbits isn't the lure itself, but the data they collect. The cameras, linked to the AI system, are constantly feeding back information on python movement, hunting patterns, and population density. This creates a real-time heat map of the invasion. Future plans involve integrating this data with other high-tech tools. One proposed idea is to use drone support equipped with advanced thermal imaging. Once an AI alert from a Robo Rabbit is triggered, a drone could be dispatched immediately to confirm the sighting, provide aerial surveillance, and guide the human removal teams directly to the snake's exact position. By combining the luring power of the rabbit with the viewing power of the drone and the analyzing power of the computer, the entire system becomes exponentially more efficient than any hunter alone. This multi-pronged approach treats the Everglades not just as a wild space, but as a vast, connected surveillance network. Since the year 2000, professional teams have managed to remove over 23,000 pythons from the Everglades. That is a huge success. But with the python population still estimated to be in the tens of thousands, the effort is relentless. Removing a few thousand snakes annually doesn't eliminate the problem. It merely keeps the problem from getting worse. A recent assessment by the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, confirmed that despite all innovative efforts, pythons are still having severe negative impacts on native wildlife. The overall python population has not been eliminated, and eradication remains out of reach. The goal of the state has fundamentally shifted from victory to long-term population control and management. The battle requires not just persistence, but constant creativity, like the Robo Rabbit, and the political will to fund a war that may never truly end. It's a testament to the idea that conservation today is increasingly a job for robotics, artificial intelligence, and dedicated human intervention. The introduction of the Robo Rabbit marks the boldest fusion of biology and technology in conservation history. The fight continues, and every small win offers a glimmer of hope. The python invasion has transformed the Everglades, rendering once vibrant ecosystems eerily quiet. The innovation of the Robo Rabbit demonstrates a powerful, new path forward, combining the ethical necessity of conservation with the boldest applications of technology. It's a testament to human ingenuity against the brute force of nature. The central question remains, will this experiment be the turning point that saves a national treasure, or will the pythons adapt and force us back to the drawing board? The race is on, and the fate of the Everglades hangs in the balance. Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, click on the next video on your screen. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.